everyone, and welcome to Think Outside the Board. I'm your host, Brian Toohey, and this is a monthly update. It's the early April monthly update, and in these monthly update videos, I do four things. First of all, I profile currently running Kickstarters that you may want to back, what I consider to be the best Kickstarters that are currently running right now out there. So the period for this video are the Kickstarters that are completing their funding between April 5th and April 18th. And you can use these videos in conjunction with my website, which is called Think Outside the Board, to not have to deal with all the hassle of Kickstarter, because these videos will cover what I think are the best Kickstarters currently running. And then on my website every day, I post an update with the Kickstarters that just launched the previous day. So you can use those kind of written columns to see everything that's out there within some measure, because I don't include quite everything. I do a little bit of quality control. And then the videos to kind of make sure that there's nothing really good that you haven't completely, blanked on. And then also in the videos, I do a quick section on the games that I have personally backed since the last video, the games that I have acquired into my collection. And then the last section is, again, a little bit of a longer section, like the first section. And that is a section in which I talk about the games that I've played since the last video. So for this video, it's going to be a shorter video this time. We have 6 Kickstarters that we're going to be talking about, 4 games that I've personally backed since the last video, 5 games that I've acquired, and only 1 game that I've played. Anyway, let's get going. Let's get started on the currently running Kickstarter section, because the first one expires tomorrow. And I need to get this video shot and edited so that I can beat the first campaign finishing, and that campaign is Floriferous. Now, Floriferous funds on April 5th. They currently have about $75,000 in their campaign. They had an initial minimum funding goal of $10,000, so they're at about 7.5 times their initial funding requirement. Floriferous is a light game for 1 to 4 players. It's a card game and a set collection game. It's being published by Pencil First Games. Pencil First Games is Eduardo Baraf's company and has published most of his games, most of his designs. The ones you may have heard of, the most popular games that they've published are Herbaceous, Skull Hollow, and Sunset Over Water. And there are 3 designers that have started working together on several games, one of them being Eduardo Baraf, the other 2 being Steve Finn, who you may also have heard of from his company, Dr. Finn's Games, and Keith Matejka. Now, Eduardo Baraf designed the games that I mentioned that were published through his company. Steve Finn has done Biblios on his own, and he's also done Herbaceous and Sunset Over Water with Eduardo Baraf. And then Keith Matejka has done Role Player on his own. That's kind of been his big game to date. And he also worked on Herbaceous and Skull Hollow. Now, the art on this game, on Floriferous, is by Clementine Camperdew, which this is her first big published game, and Kim Robinson, who has done the Whatnot Cabinet previously. And the Whatnot Cabinet was another game from Eduardo and Steve Finn and Keith Matejka, and that one I almost backed. It looked really, really cool. So this is another game that Kim Robinson is working on with this crew. So this is a flowered theme game. It has to do with cards, set collection, and there's going to be player pawns that you're going to be using to kind of select the cards each round, and will determine then in future rounds what cards you can take. So it's a simple game. It's kind of the pawn mechanism is the main thing that determines how you can take cards and will inform your strategy a little bit. So in this campaign, there are 4 pledge levels. There is the first $20 pledge level, and that will get you Floriferous with the early spring mini expansion. Now, most of the games that Eduardo Baraf has made have mini expansions connected to them. So for the $40 price range, there's actually 2 $40 pledge levels. Both of them will get you Floriferous with its mini expansion. But one of those pledge levels will also get you Herbaceous with the Flower Pack mini expansion, and the other $40 pledge will get you Sunset Over Water with that game's Nature's Muse mini expansion. Now, if you want to get both of those games and their mini expansions, in addition to Floriferous and its mini expansion, then you want the $60 pledge level, which will get you all 3 of those games and their mini expansions. And remember, Floriferous completes its funding April 5th, Monday, which hopefully I'll get this posted before Monday. But if you're seeing this and it's Sunday or Monday, act fast if you think you want Floriferous. Next up, and this game will complete its funding on April 8th, is Gloomier, A Night at Hemlock Hall. Now, their funding requirement was $20,000. They're currently sitting at $570,000, which is 28 times their minimum requested funding. This is another very light card game. This one plays 2 to 5 players. If you have never heard of or played Gloom, because it's been around for a while, there are a lot of different iterations and different versions of it. But it is a game where you have a group of family members, and it feels very like an Edward Gorey cartoon. You know, the original cartoons that kind of inspired the Addams Family. And his cartoons were very kind of creepy. And so are these cards. And also these cards are the kind of transparent see-through cards like they use in Mystic Vale. And you are essentially trying to kill off your family. So it's kind of a press your luck, take that game, with the difference being that instead of trying to kill other players' family members, you're trying to kill your own. And you're trying to kill your own after you do horrible things to them. So you want to do bad things to your family members and then kill them. And you will get, I think, negative points, and the player with the most negative points wins the game. And to stop other players from doing terrible things to their family members, you can have good and positive things happen to their family members, which will give them positive points. And in this game, you don't want positive points. You want to die terribly, tragically, horribly, and miserably. So Gloomier is a new version, and also it comes with a sort of campaign type game so that you can play this over a period of games and you'll have a little bit of a overall kind of storytelling narrative to it. Now, Gloomier, this new card game, just like Gloom, is a card game that mainly uses hand management, layering, which is what you call it with the transparent cards that you're placing over the cards that you already have kind of in your tableau, and horror-based storytelling, really. And it's published by Atlas Games, and Gloom is really their thing that they've kind of done to date. They have a whole little cottage industry of Gloom games. They've also published Cursed Court and Dungeoneer. And this game, like all of the other Gloom games, is designed by Keith Baker, and the art on this is by Topper Helmers. And this appears to be Topper Helmer's first published game. Now let's talk about pledge levels on this one. So for $24, you are going to get this new version of Gloom called Gloomier, and you will get the Gloom Chronicles, which is the campaign mini expansion. For $49, you will get those 2 things plus the Gloom Briefcase. Now it's called a briefcase because it's kind of like a briefcase, but it's sad and depressed and having a miserable time like everything in the world of Gloom. But essentially the Gloom Briefcase is a storage solution where potentially if you have all of the Gloom stuff, you'll be able to store it all in this one case. Now, if you want to pledge the $250 level, you will get all of those things and then pretty much everything Gloom that has been produced to date, which will include the original Gloom game, 5 different Gloom iterations, and then a bunch of Gloom expansions and extras. I think it's 5 expansions. So I think you're getting the base game, 5 Gloom games, 5 Gloom expansions, some extras, plus the Gloom Briefcase, and the new Gloomier game, and the Gloom Chronicles. So everything, $250. It's a very, very expensive amount to pay for this game. But if you love Gloom, this is your pledge level, man. This will get you everything. Now, after that, finishing its funding on April 12th is Robinson Crusoe, the Collector's Edition. And quick little note here, this is not on Kickstarter. This is the only game that is going to be on this list that is on GameFound. So if you want to get Robinson Crusoe, you need to go to GameFound. Now, their initial funding, their minimum funding that they requested was $60,000. They're currently at $1.3 million. So that is 23 times their required or requested minimum funding. Robinson Crusoe is a heavy game. So unlike the other two games we've mentioned so far, this is a heavy game. It's a very heavy, crunchy game. In fact, it has a listed player count of 1 to 4, but this is one of those games that I've heard talked about that is best with the fewer number of players as possible. So you're probably wanting to play this one as a solo game. You can probably make it work as a 2-player game, I think along the lines of like Mage Knight or Nemo's War, but you probably don't want to go above that 2-player count. So 1 to 2, that's the sweet spot for this one. Now, this is a worker placement game that has adventure, exploration, and storytelling. Mechanically, it's not that it's heavy mechanically, it's just that it's really hard to do things in this game and the choices are brutal and it's sort of punishing like Arkham Horror, the card game. So it is published by Portal Games, which is Ignacy Civicek's company. And they basically publish his games. So they've done Detective and Modern Crime board game and some expansions and sort of sequels to that line of games. They've done Imperial Settlers and 51st State, which are almost the same game, just the theme is a little bit different. They both have had expansions, but Imperial Settlers has had many more expansions. I think for me personally, I like 51st State better, but if you're going for content, you want to go with the Imperial Settlers theming. They also have recently published Imperial Settlers Empires of the North, which is a whole other line of games under that Imperial Settlers IP name. And they also publish Pret-a-Porter and the Stronghold games. So Stronghold and Stronghold Undead. And there was just a Kickstarter last year that sort of brought both of those games together in one Kickstarter edition game, and that should be delivering actually very soon, probably in the next month. Now, the game is designed by Ignacy and also Joanna Kajanka, and she has worked on the original game. She's also worked on Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North. And I think she's worked on the new Book of Adventures game as well. So there are several different pledge levels on GameFound for this, and they include both new content and old content. So let's kind of get into this now. The $35 pledge level will get you something called the Book of Adventures, which is a scenario book. It's being called an Almanac of Scenarios. And this is something that you can pledge if you already have the original Robinson Crusoe game. It's just going to give you a lot more scenarios at all player counts and all difficulty levels. So it's just a really great booklet with many things that you can use it for within the game. It looks really good. And I think that was probably what really initiated this Kickstarter, was this new Book of Adventures. Now, you can also, for $99, buy the collector's edition of Robinson Crusoe, and with that, you will get something called the Open and Play campaign. This is sort of a mini campaign that is designed to teach you the game, kind of like Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion in its first half dozen scenarios, slowly kind of ramped up and was able to sort of be a tutorial to teach you Gloomhaven and how that plays. And I think that's great. I think this is a really, really neat thing. Robinson Crusoe is a much beloved game, but it's very heavy, and people talk about how it can be difficult to learn the game. So having this special little introductory campaign, I think, is great. Also at that pledge level, let's say you already have the game, you can get the Book of Adventures with the Open and Play campaign. So it's basically the Book of Adventures you could get for $35, plus the Open and Play campaign that otherwise would be coming with the collector's edition. So if you already have the game, you can get those two things. Now, if you pledge at the $135 level, you will get all of those things. So you'll get the collector's edition of the game, you'll get the Open and Play campaign, and you'll get the Book of Adventures. Then if you go up to the $194 level, that is called the Endless Adventures pledge, and that basically is everything. So that will come with all three of the things that I've been talking about already, plus a couple other expansions that are out there that exist. One is Mystery Tales, which has new things to it, including a campaign and a couple of standalone scenarios. So it just gives you a lot of new content for the game beyond the base game. And also the Treasure Chest, which is another expansion that was out there, and that expansion existed basically to collect all of the promos that had been put out previously. So again, it's just kind of like a bunch of new content spanning different sorts of resources and mechanics, and a lot of it is promos from the past, collects it all together. So if you don't own Robinson Crusoe, but you've been looking for the time to jump on and you really think you're going to like it and you want to get everything, it's the $194 pledge. There are about 13 different artists who have worked on this game, and I feel like I can't mention them all. There's just too many, and they also have a lot of these Eastern European names that are hard for me to pronounce. So I'm only going to talk about two of them, and the two of them that have kind of worked across the most of this content. So one of those artists is Mateusz Bielski, who has worked on Cry Havoc, High Society, Imperial Settlers, and Neuroshima Hex 3.0. And the other artist is Vincent Dutrait, who is a very prolific artist, and he has worked on the new version of Atlantis Rising, Broom Service, Diplomacy, Elysium, Jaipur, Lewis and Clark, Lost Cities, Medici, Mythic Battles Pantheon, Pathfinder adventure card game, The Quest for El Dorado, and Raptor. He's a great artist. So those two artists plus 11 more have worked on various parts of this content. This campaign, as I said, will complete its funding on April 12th. So if this is something you might be interested in, you need to go over, check it out at GameFound. Now, back on Kickstarter, on April 13th, Fjords will complete its funding. Fjords had a minimum required funding of $6.5 thousand. They're currently sitting at $116,000, so they've done very well for a smaller budgeted game, and they are at 18 times their requested minimum funding. Now, this takes us back to the world of lighter games. Fjords is a light game for 2 to 4 players. The original game, I think, was 2-player only, so this version kind of opens it up so that instead of just a 2-player kind of dueling game, you can now play with up to 4 players. It is a tile placement and area majority game, so you're going to be placing out tiles for the first half of the game, and then in the second half of the game, it kind of becomes this area majority game. It's published by Grail Games, who in the past have published Medici, Stevenson's Rocket, and Yellow and Yangtze. The original game was designed by Franz Benno de Long, who is best well known for Container. And with this new version, Phil Walker Harding has come in and he's designed 5 new variants and modules that you can kind of throw in the game to give it more variability and mix things up. And Phil Walker Harding, if you think you know that name, he has previously worked on Baron Park, Cacao, Gizmos, Imhotep, Silver and Gold, and Sushi Go and Sushi Go Party. So he's designed quite a few very well-liked, well-respected, kind of lighter, simpler games. And then the art on this new version is by Beth Sobel, who is awesome, and she's worked on Arboretum, Between Two Cities, Calico, Viticulture, and Wingspan. So for this one, it's a smaller game, as I've said, and the pledge levels reflect that. So there, in fact, are only 2 pledge levels. The first one is for $26, and that will get you Fjords, the game. The second one is for $45, and that's going to kind of throw in a bunch of extras. So you're going to get some special 2-player pieces so that you can play that 2-player version of the game with cooler pieces. There's also a Secret Runes mini expansion, and then there is a deluxe upgrade for the runestones in the game. If you buy the normal $26 version, you're going to get cardboard tokens, but if you get this upgrade pack, then you will get these plastic runestones. That's the upgrade, so it's going to be in plastic. And again, Fjords will complete its funding on April 13th. Now, the last 2 campaigns that I'm going to talk about each have multiple games in the campaign. So the first of these is Solani and the Girl Who Made the Stars. and this will complete funding on April the 14th. Their minimum funding goal was $30,000. They're at $96,000 right now, so it's about 3 times their minimum requested funding. I think I'm a little unsure of where this is going to fall in the medium light, medium heavy range. I think probably medium light. And both of these games are sort of abstract tile placement games that have their theme taken from sort of world mythology. And it looks pretty cool. They're actually doing a series of these games. So these are the first 2 planned, and then there are going to be at least 2 more coming in a later Kickstarter. And then I don't know if it'll go beyond that. But Final Frontier Games in the past has published Cavern Tavern, Rise to Nobility, Robin Hood and the Merry Men, and they have Merchant's Cove coming out very, very soon. Should be delivering within the next month or 2. And Merchant's Cove, I think, is going to take them to the next level. It has a design to it that just looks amazing from Johnny Pack Canton. Oh, and they also published one of his other games called Coloma, which I think has been their biggest hit to date. So between Coloma and now Merchant's Cove coming out, I think this is going to elevate Final Frontier into a higher level of publisher. And so it's interesting that they're taking this opportunity to then make these abstract kind of world mythology themed games. There are 2 of these. So the first is called The Girl Who Made the Stars. Both of these games are about constellations and mythology from different cultures, but how that mythology kind of interprets stars and constellations and astronomy. So the first of these is designed by John Schulters, and the art is by Lamaro Smith. And for both of them, it seems to be their first big published game. The other game, Solani, is designed by Drake Villarreal. He worked on Merchant's Cove, and he also worked on some aspects of Endless Winter. And that game, I think, is going to be huge when the Kickstarter comes out, delivers later this year. So Drake Villarreal, I think he is also climbing the ladder of fantastic board game designing. And the art on his game is by Bojan Drango, and this is his first published game as far as I can tell. Now, the pledge levels are very simple. You either pledge $49, and there are 2 $49 pledge levels, so you can get either one of those games. If you want both, then you pledge the $98 pledge level and you get both. Now, to me, it's kind of interesting because I think Drake Villarreal, I like the pedigree that he's coming in with, having done Merchant's Cove and worked on Endless Winter. But the other game, The Girl Who Made the Stars, looks a little more interesting to me, and I like the design of it. Solani is like very, very abstract. It looks very pretty, but very abstract in the way of like a Sagrada or an Azul or something like that. The other game, The Girl Who Made the Stars, has a little more character art. It looks like a little less abstract. It's still an abstract game, but the things on the game and characters and kind of the stars, I think, are represented a little bit more traditionally in that game. And I like the look of it. So it puts me in a quandary then. So do I back the game by the designer that I really like, or the game that I think looks really cool, or do I get both? I don't know. That's the decision we all have to make, I guess. And again, Solani and The Girl Who Made the Stars will complete its funding on April 14th. So the final game in this section is Factory Funner, Bear Raid, and Ghosts of Christmas, and that will complete its funding on April the 15th. Okay, so all of these games seem to come in around the medium light range, and the player counts are variable. For Factory Funner, the player count is 1 to 6. For Ghosts of Christmas, 3 to 4, and for Bear Raid, 3 to 6. Now, the requested minimum funding for this project for all 3 of these games was $50,000. It's currently sitting at $175,000, so about 3.5 times their requested funding. And it is being published by BoardGameTables.com. Now, they have kind of done a bunch of these very kind of light, smaller games, and they've been doing very well with them. They did Bites, Loot of Lima, Kabuto Sumo, On Tour, and QE. And all 3 of these games are by different artists and designers. So Bear Raid is designed by Ryan Courtney, who previously did Curious Cargo and Pipeline. And the art on this is by Nick Nazzaro, who's worked on some not as well-known games, Dragoon and Life Siphon. And this is a stock-holding, economic, trading game with the real emphasis on this being shorting stock. So if you've played Pipeline, which is both a tile placement game, but also an economic game, I'm curious to see where Ryan Courtney goes with this, because I like his designs. They're very sharp, and the art on this looks very simple and elegant at the same time. It kind of reminds me a little bit of what Ian O'Toole does, but again, this is by Nick Nazzaro. And I mean, for the record, the art on Dragoon and Life Siphon is a very, very specific kind of graphic look to it, which is striking. And I think the art is as popular as Dragoon and Life Siphon have gotten. I think much of it is because of the striking art. Factory Funner is designed by Korn van Moorsel, who previously has done Habitats and Nova Luna. And the art on it is by Steven Tu, who also worked on Habitats, and he also did art on a game called Roll to the Top. Now, this game is a puzzly tile placement game where you're kind of connecting these different machines that kind of go all over the place with these connecting tubes and things. It looks pretty fun. Pretty Factory Funner. And then the final game here is called Ghosts of Christmas, and it is a redesign or a re-implementation of a game previously published called Time Palatrix. And that game and this new version are designed by Taiki Shinizawa. The art here is by Maria Serdukin, who did art on a game called Zestria that was on Kickstarter last year, which I almost backed because it looked really, really interesting, cool. It was like a party game that had to do with marrying different people together and creating offspring. And it looks really, really cool, but it was being published kind of locally somewhere in Eastern Europe, I think, and the shipping on it was insane. So it was a smaller game I kind of wanted to take a chance on pledging, but I don't think I ended up doing it because the shipping to the US for once this time was so high. So this game is a trick-taking card game that's themed around Christmas and A Christmas Carol. So you've got characters like Scrooge and Bob Cratchit and Tiny Tim on the cards. Now, pledge level here in this campaign, for $15, you can get the Ghost of Christmas. For $34, you can either get Factory Funner or Bear Raid. For $69, you can get all three games. For $89, you get all three games and component upgrades. And it's different for each game. For Factory Funner, what you're essentially getting is a very nice custom wood insert, kind of like a Broken Token insert, but not Broken Token. The other two games, the component upgrades that you get for those games are screen-painted wooden tokens that will replace probably the cardboard tokens in the original games. So two of the games, screen-painted wooden tokens. One of the games, custom wooden insert. And then if you want to pledge an even higher level, for $129, you will get all of those things plus a game bag. And again, this campaign will conclude on April 15th. So that brings us to the end of the currently running Kickstarters. Okay, so Brian, I ask myself, what did you pledge from the last video? What did I profile last time and talk about that was on Kickstarter that I actually backed? And I have 4 answers. The first is Caper Europe. Now, Caper Europe looked very interesting to me. I've heard things about the first game, which is, I think that's the opposite of a game that I talked about this week. So Caper Europe originally was a 2 to 4 player game, and just called Caper, and they've made a new version of it, and the new version is a 2-player only game. So they're kind of going the opposite way of Fjords. Caper Europe is themed around kind of hiring criminals to do all these crimes, and obviously in Caper Europe, it's now set in Europe, and it reminds me very much of a simple war game. You know, a lot of these lighter war games have essentially area majority over 5 different stages or venues on the board, maybe 6, maybe 7, but they have it's divided into several different kind of locations, and you're trying to get a majority in each one of those things. And I guess if you start to do really badly in one of them, maybe you just let that go and you assume that that's a lost cause, and you focus more of your choices and your strategies on the remaining areas where you can still win. So Caper Europe very much feels like that kind of a simple war game to me. I don't own any of those games, and I don't really love war games anyway. So I think for me to get a version of that kind of a game, but themed with this bright, kind of cartoony, vibrant art, and to have it be themed around criminals stealing art and committing crimes, I think that's the way for me to go. So Caper Europe was a back for me. I also backed the new Everdell campaign, which included 2 new expansions, New Leaf and Mistwood, I think. Mist something. That's the one with the spider. And I own Everdell. I own all of the other expansions. I really like it. I think it's got a lot of variability, and this was kind of just a must-back for me. And I also did get the collector's edition box, so I'll be able to kind of keep everything together in one place. I also got those cool little resource trays, as well as sleeves. So I went all in on that one. Then I also backed Three Sisters. I don't have too many roll and write games. I've gotten a couple recently. I really like Roam and Roll, but it is a heavy roll and write game, and I think it would be nice to have a lighter roll and write game. At some point I may have to go out and get cartographers, but I don't own that yet. I also did get 7 Bridges this year, which I didn't like and I'm selling. So I'm looking for a lighter roll and write game, and I think this new game by the designers of Fleet the Dice Game, Matt Riddle and Ben Pinchback, seems pretty neat. And I like the farming theme. I think my fiance will like the farming theme, and it was cheap. You know, it was like $29, maybe 34 with shipping. So it did not require a lot of investment to back this one. And I think it'll be a good game to be able to have and review for the channel as well. But a new roll and write game from the designers of Fleet the Dice Game, awesome, yeah. Finally, the last game that I backed was Valeria Card Kingdom's Darksworn. And this is one for me, I've never owned any Valeria games. Never owned them. I think when I really started getting into the hobby a few years ago, Valeria Card Kingdoms was already kind of on its way, and I never bought one. And I've always thought about it. But I know they're kind of simple, light games, and so it just seemed like something I could try at any time, but I never had around me. So the thing that really kind of pushed me over the edge with this is this new Darksworn expansion that comes through this campaign, which makes Valeria Card Kingdoms a cooperative campaign type game. And that is awesome because my fiance and we've been playing a lot of games together throughout the pandemic. She does not always love competitive games, so definitely if there's a cooperative element, that becomes a huge selling point for us, and we really like playing things cooperatively together. So this was a great time for me to jump into the world of Valeria Card Kingdoms, and I think I got some extras, but mainly it was just the original base game plus this new cooperative expansion. So the games that I have acquired since the last video, there are 5 of them. One of them is a Kickstarter that arrived, and that was the Cloudspire Kickstarter. I backed the last campaign, which is the second campaign for Cloudspire. There had been one previously, and I think at the time I didn't get Cloudspire. I was sort of on the fence, and I'd just gotten a lot of Too Many Bones stuff, which is probably why I did not get Burn Cycle this time, because I just had bought a lot of Cloudspire stuff. Burn Cycle looks really cool too, so maybe they'll do a second campaign for that later and I can go in on that one. Anyway, with this one, I think I went all in. I got all the Cloudspire stuff. I got the big Skymat, which I'm actually really excited to also use for the 7th Continent, since the 7th Continent playmat always ships in this little box folded up and you can't get the creases out. They're just permanently creased. And that 7th Continent mat isn't big enough for the territory that you're building. I don't understand the 7th Continent playmat, basically. It's poorly designed and poorly made. Anyway, when I play 7th Continent in the future, I will be playing with this huge Cloudspire spy mat, which can accommodate all of a long game of 7th Continent. And I'm really excited to get into all of the Cloudspire factions. So Cloudspire is essentially a tower defense game. It is put out and designed by by Chip Theory Games, who makes Too Many Bones. They use a lot of these really kind of chunky poker chips with cool designs on them, and a lot of neoprene mats that are, cut and have double stitching, just very good components at Chip Theory Games all around. So I'm excited to get this one to the table. It's a massive game though, and there's so much stuff to it. And I am planning later in this year to launch a Twitch channel, and I'm wondering if I should just save it and then kind of just start going through it on the Twitch channel. I have a few games like that, a few kind of big storytelling, campaign-y type games that right now I'm almost not playing because I'm thinking like, I should just wait and just start it on Twitch so I can kind of play it from the beginning there and have that content available for everyone, rather than getting, halfway into a big campaign game and then trying to decide whether I want to restart it for the Twitch channel or just kind of continue on and perhaps have some people disappointed that the first half of that campaign isn't able to be seen. So for now, I think I'm going to sit on it, but I am really excited to play it. Now, I also had a order of some retail games come in. I had Horrified, which I think for me, I am selling Forbidden Island, and that will kind of be the new cooperative game that I use when I'm playing with non-gamer friends or, kids, if I'm teaching them like a kind of entry-level cooperative game. I think my go-to now is going to be Horrified and Forbidden Island. If I had a Forbidden Desert, those are getting removed from the collection. But I like Horrified. It's pretty cool. It's a simple game. It's easy to teach. It's sort of an action point game where you're going around and you're doing different things and you have certain action points you can use every turn. But generally what you're doing is you are picking up tokens and then using them as you move around the board to first disempower the monsters. And then once you've done that first step, you then kill them. But it's all about kind of these different tokens that you collect and the colors of the tokens and which tokens can disempower which monster in which way. And then you're also trying to save villagers and kind of move the villagers around. It's a very heavily thematic, fun, neat, light little cooperative game. And I think my fiance is going to like it. And I think it'll be a great game to have, as I said, for non-gamers, or we have some friends that we go to their house every Thanksgiving, although we didn't go this last year because of the pandemic, but we're hoping to go again this year. And they have some kids, and this would be a great game to, I think, play with them. Now, I also got Reef, which is designed by Emerson Matsuchi, who did the Century games, Century Golem Edition, Century Spice Road, Century A New World, Century Eastern Mountains, all those games. And he had a game called Foundations of Rome on Kickstarter last year, which should be delivering, I think, this year, although who knows with all of the shipping delays. But he's a good designer. I am intrigued by his designs, and he has another little abstract, simple game, which takes place underwater with these little plastic pieces that you stack on top of each other. It's called a Reef, and they had a pretty big sale on this one recently on one of the online retailers, and so I scooped it up, and when I did that, that's why I got Horrified and the other two games I'm about to mention, because I had to fill out my cart to get free shipping. So those other two games represent an ongoing effort of mine to get all of the Time Stories expansions, because, as you may have known, the white cycle is over, and they are now producing Time Story games in something called the blue cycle, where every one of the games now is in a blue box and it plays standalone. In the first cycle, you had the base game, and then you had all these small expansions. So if you wanted to play any of those little expansions, you had to first own the base game. The thing is, now that they're publishing this blue cycle, I think they're going to no longer be publishing the white cycle. And so I've been trying to get all the expansions before they kind of go out of print forever. And this was the last two. So I picked up Brotherhood of the Coast, and I picked up Madame. And I have one more game that I do not yet have in my place because it is filling out my cart on a pre-order. So it was a pre-order for Cryo, and I think I put Maglev Metro in there. So whenever Cryo eventually ships out, I will also get the last Time Stories expansion I don't currently have, which I think is Estrella Drive, maybe. Yeah. But for now, Brotherhood of the Coast and Madame. And I'm really excited. I really like Time Stories. I mean, they're one-time things because once you solve the puzzle in them, you know the puzzle and you can't really play it again. But I feel like there's enough gameplay, and it's so well produced, and the card art is great, and I really enjoy Time Stories, so I'm looking forward to playing all of these expansions. So those were my 5 acquired games this period. The only played game this period is Lost Ruins of Arnak. Now, I just put up a first impressions video, so if you'd like to see more about Lost Ruins of Arnak, you can watch it there on the channel. Go check it out. I teach the mechanics of the game as quickly as I can and then tell you what I thought about it. But I'll tell you that again right here. I liked it. I've only played it once. I think I would like to play the solo game before I get it off the table. I still have it sitting over on the table right over there. And it's not that heavy a game. It's a deck builder that uses some other mechanics as well. Basically resource management, there's a research track, and worker placement because you're placing workers out on the board to these dig sites, and you're, what is the word they use? Overcoming monsters at the dig sites. But I really like it. It's very thematic. It has this jungle feeling, kind of like, Indiana Jones or Tomb Raider. It's a very interestingly packaged game, I think, because in some ways it feels like an older game. It feels like a game from 10 years ago in some ways. It's not super extravagant. It's not chasing kind of the new shiny the way a lot of these new Kickstarter productions are that are just so overproduced. Yet at the same time, if you compared it to a game from 10 years ago, it has really nice components. The cardboard is very thick, and it has a nice kind of feel to it and weight to it. Some cardboard components are very, kind of thin and cheap. These are very nice cardboard components. The wood tiles that you use for your tokens and your archaeologists, I like them. They're chunky. And then they've got some very tactile pieces. There are these jewels, there are arrowheads, and then there are these scrolls or tokens. And all of those 3 resources are made from some kind of plastic, and they're very kind of chunky, and they feel good in the hand. They're nice components. And even like the tiles that come out in the dig sites and the monsters, again, it's very thick cardboard. It just feels very well produced. So it's an interesting combination of game because it does feel like an older game in some ways. It also plays quickly. It doesn't feel super overproduced, but at the same time, it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like some of those Queen games that just feel like, they publish some great games, but production-wise, they kind of feel like a lot of junky cardboard in a box. And this definitely does not feel like that. It feels like a well-made production without being, Kickstarter-type bloat. And I like the fact that it comes with a second side to the board. So if you get kind of tired of the first board, you can flip to a second side, and it changes up some of the mechanics. There's just a lot of variability in the game. And the more I think about it, the more I kind of want to keep playing it and go back to it. And like I said, I think I'm going to get to it later today and play a solo game before I put it away. But I'm really excited as soon as we're vaccinated, very soon, and I can start playing with larger groups again to experience this game on multiple player counts and with different players, because it's a really, really fun game. And I just want to see how those choices that you make in the game are going to work at different player counts and with different people. I think there are enough choices there that it can appeal to somewhat heavy gamers, and yet it is an easy enough game to learn and to teach, and it plays fairly quickly that I think lighter gamers aren't going to have a problem with it either. So I think this is going to be a game that has some staying power in my collection. And I've only played it once, you know, but off of that initial play, I rated it an 8.5, and it's sitting at my number 6 spot in my 2020 game list. That may change. I still have another at least a dozen games I need to play before I determine the final order of that list and do a video on it. So it could move around, but it's already pretty high up there, and I think it's a really, really solid game. It's something I would unabashedly recommend almost to anyone. So it gets a thumbs up from me, and I had a really good time playing it. I look forward to playing it again. So that is my only played game this period, Lost Ruins of Arnak. We're at the end of this video. If you have not clicked that like button or the subscribe button yet, you could do that now, and I'd really appreciate it. You can also hit the alarm button if you want to be notified when I publish future videos. You hear that? Getting old, man. Getting too old for this shit, just like Danny Glover. Although this shit is board games, and you never really get too old for board games. Getting too old for it. Having all this tension in my shoulders, though, you know? Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you for spending a little time with me. I hope that I was able to help you out with your Kickstarter purchases or your considerations. And make sure to check back every couple weeks. Every 2 weeks, I publish a new monthly update. And the goal here is to try to help alert people and break down some of the best, most attractive stuff that's on Kickstarter to help you make a decision. So I will see you maybe in 2 weeks for that next video. But between now and then, there are going to be a lot of other good videos too. So you should keep coming back and checking things out. All right. This was a good day. Tomorrow will be a good day too. And I will see you in the next video. Take care.